Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whichever part of the world all of you are when you log into this show and listen to the guest. You're going to have a great experience on a fabulous book that she has chosen for the day. Welcome back to Leaders in Libraries, Season 4. After successful 3 seasons of 74 global guests who have come and spoken about how books have played a very significant role in their growth, we are here with one another guest of the day. Let me have the honor of introducing her, and then we will smoothly flow into the conversation for today. She is Usha Cherial, Senior Director HR at Reflections Infosystems, a global IT services and IT consulting organization with 2 decades plus of HR work across large corporates and global consulting companies like the KPMGs. Done anything and everything that you can talk about in the area of HR, which is talent acquisition to talent management to PMS to employee engagement to culture, whatnot. I think a complete holistic HR person. Beyond all this, a book lover. And when I invited her for this event, she very generously accepted the invitation. I'm so glad to have you here, Usha. Good evening to you.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here, Raji.
Lovely, lovely. So let's straight away get started with the conversation on the great book that you have chosen. But before that, I'm going to start with this interesting question that I'm always curious to ask all my guests, which is how did the association with books happen? How young was it? Tell us a little about that.
I think I need to credit books partly to my mother, who was an
Mhm,
avid reader herself, and the school that I went to.
mhm,
Both of them encouraged reading, and it was almost as if we had to put a stop to reading storybooks at times in the evenings when we would
mhm.
hide storybooks within a textbook at the time when we were supposed to be doing homework. I think that was the initial love of reading because House had Reader's Digest. I don't see many of them nowadays,
Yeah.
but that was such a wonderful experience reading those, apart from all the usual inadvertents or as the years grew by, the respective books. And the
Right.
fact that we crave books as gifts during birthdays is another thing I remember.
Yeah.
Because nowadays there are so many distractions, but we didn't luckily have any of those.
Very true. Very true. Luckily, we didn't have that's the right word that you chose. In fact, thanks for reminding on Reader's Digest because I remember during those days, if somebody had Reader's Digest in their hall, it means well-to-do family and pretty intelligent family they come from. That's the perception we would have. Because we would have the Tinkles and Chanda Mama and Enid Blytons and others of the world, but Reader's Digest obviously was a great. And I also remember National Geographic as one great book that also was a great read for people. So thanks for reminding. How early was this? First
I
standard, fourth
think,
standard, beyond
yeah,
that?
eight to 10, that age group, yes.
Yeah. And how did the transition from those kind of books to management or leadership happen for you?
I think more by necessity,
Mm-hmm.
as we were part of L&D in the early functions, we had
Mm-hmm.
to be up to date with what was going on.
Right.
And I used to remember a senior manager in our organization who was an
Mm-hmm.
avid book reader, and he had the habit of sharing one book review per month.
Okay.
That got us hooked on to at least exploring what the book is about,
Mm-hmm.
even if you didn't read the whole book. So
Okay.
some people like that were constantly giving books or giving book recommendations, which also helped.
How I mean, these people have played such significant role in our lives, I think, by just doing the small work of monthly book reviews. How lovely. Superb. So the book that I've chosen today is Drive by Daniel Pink, which is a classic in itself. And I'm so glad to talk about this book once again. So I'm going to straight away jump into a couple of things that caught my attention, Usha. And the first one that I'm going to ask you is he talks about the two kinds of leaders, right? The type X and the type I. What is your agreement with Daniel on this concept of need to move from the X to the I? How do you see that as a leader today?
Yeah. In fact, he makes an interesting point that children are usually type X when they are born. It is the constraints in the way we are brought up in school or at the workplace that makes us tend towards X. In simple terms, when you're intrinsically motivated, you do the job just for the joy of it, for being the pleasure of being with the job or the task. When you graduate to X or get clouded by the perception of the world, you start
Mm,
looking at what's in it for me, what are the rewards, are there any incentives, should I really be doing this? So
mm,
you dilute the joy that comes from actual task,
mm,
and you get into other aspects which are short lived. So
mm,
science has proven, research, I think he quotes many studies which show that
mm.
there are artists, there are others who
Yeah.
produce much, much more and better quality work when they are self driven and are motivated by that intrinsic reward of the job itself.
Mm. So, what is your input to the young leaders? How should they look at this?
I think if anybody reflects on what are
Mm.
the types of work or the assignments which gives them intrinsic satisfaction,
Um, uh,
typically in a corporate environment you might not get 100% of a job role that
true.
matches your aspiration. But if you get to include 20%, 30% of a subject that truly invigorates you, then you do very well. And that tends to reflect and in other parts of the work as well. I have seen people who are extremely busy in a, say, in an HR VP role, where there's a lot of query management and there are mundane tasks. But
Yeah.
in addition, when they pick up another hobby project. It was
Mm.
accidental that there was one team I remember
Hmm.
studying the book flow and attempting to make it work at the workplace. Now
Right.
that initial skepticism there was from some quarters as to how it will work, but then when they channelized that energy and brought it to many other people in the organization, then it brought so much more results. So
Lovely.
at workplaces, if you are a manager, you have
Mm.
team members,
Mm.
this is definitely a concept that you can use and see how it actually invigorates a team to produce so much more.
Lovely. I think it's left to the individual to figure out and add that 20-30% into the mundane work, right?
True.
Very true. Or else
Sometimes
you
the organization can also supplement it.
offer,
I believe
yes.
there are hobby projects that some organizations now sponsor because they allow you to devote X percentage of time working on a project that might not have financial rewards in the immediate future, but
Mm.
through research can be productized at a later stage. So
Mm.
if there's work environment and you yourself driving yourself to do
Mm.
one thing that really inspires you.
Absolutely. I think leaders play a very significant role in giving such opportunities to the team members to get them to move from one type to the other type and also explore the other side of themselves, right? Very
Absolutely.
true. In fact, you brought this example of the Flow book and Mihaly in the book is classic, right? They're one of my all-time favorites, and I talk about that. Marshall Gotin has spoken about him in his book Mojo. Many people have taken references in Mihaly. My next question is very connected to that word flow. So, how did you give yourself a flow test in your successful career that you have seen? And what would be your advice to the young leader, budding leaders, in fact? Why should they take the test and how would that help them as per Daniel?
As you know, the test says stop what you're doing at particular intervals during the day and see which are the moments where you find yourself going through the flow, almost like a sports person who's
Mm,
at peak performance. If you
mm,
record those moments, then you begin to figure out, is it a particular set of people you work with best? Is it a particular time in the day? What is the kind of background where you give your very best? So
mm,
I myself have tried it out in one of the assignments, which was extremely tough and stretching.
mhm, mhm,
There seemed to be so much distraction around me that I could never concentrate on one project. I
mhm,
took up this challenge myself to be at work 1 hour early in the day, a
mhm.
time when there's absolutely no interruption. And of course, in
Yeah,
Bangalore traffic, there's the additional benefit of not having to go through bad traffic. And
yeah.
that 1 hour of work, I could produce, I think, much more than 5 hours of interrupted work. So it's a small thing and it might seem insignificant, but if you put it and try it out on yourself,
Yeah,
which are
yeah.
the moments where you are at your peak? What are the people? Who are the people working with you? What is the kind of work that gives you best satisfaction? I'm sure it helps you derive joy and it helps you produce your best work.
Very well. So the individual has to identify that moments through the day when he or she
Yes,
is busy
actually
with the
recording
whirlwind
it.
of the day, right?
Yeah, yeah, actually recording it, putting an alarm clock or something, which is
Mm-hmm.
tiny just for your own record, And then if you look back across a week or 2 weeks, you can see your own trends. I mean, your own peak
Mhm.
hours, or if you were to put some icon as to which ones were truly beneficial to you. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can design your workday around getting more of those moments.
Yeah, yeah. And you have technology tools available time and
Yes,
time with you. You just have to use it to your advantage, isn't it?
true.
And very, very
Absolutely.
rightly said, because I'm just reminded of this book, Deep Work by Carl Newport, who also talks about what you just did. Pull that extra 1 hour, 2 hours where you think you can really uninterrupted deep work to finish something. And suddenly you realize it's 10 times, 20 times more productive than the regular. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think this fragmentation of time with interruption is one characteristic of a normal workplace. When you're working
absolutely.
from home for some time, you might actually achieve, a non-distracted workplace. But when you get back to the office, there are people walking in, there are questions. There is so much of fragmentation of your day.
Very true. Very true. Super. That takes me to the next one I want to ask you about is this word called mastery really was interesting for me. So when I read the book first time many years back, and
Mhm.
even now when I read it once again for this talk, I have my own understanding of this word, but I want to understand from you. He talks about multiple steps, 5 or 6 steps to achieve mastery. So I've got two questions to you. Sir. What do you understand by the word mastery from your understanding of Daniel's definition? And what are the two things that somebody should do to go closer to this word mastery?
Right. It's a little tough to explain it in a sentence, but to me,
Mm,
mastery is a continuous improvement process where
mhm,
you beat your own benchmarks and
mhm,
produce excellent work.
mm,
He does quote a couple of steps, yeah,
mm,
where and one the first one, which is might sound small but very important, is do you have goals to improve yourself? And
mm.
is it a continuous goalpost that moves in
Right.
small increments? So
Mm,
if you focus on checking how well did you do this
mm,
week versus last week on
mm,
whatever your own goal is and increase the benchmark in increments, then you're so focused on improvement that you achieve mastery eventually.
mm.
That's one which is definitely useful.
Sure.
A second one, which I find, which people all tend to discount, is that mastery involves a lot of hard work,
Mm,
a lot of sweat, and
mm.
going through days when you don't want to do it, but you still persist
Yeah.
because you want to achieve. You are driven by the goal towards achieving mastery, not
Yeah.
to win a prize, not to satisfy anyone else, but just your own desire to excel. I think those two are ones that I've tried and definitely useful.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But tell me, I want to know this. You are from an IT industry, and I have worked in the manufacturing industry. And having worked in that space, continuous improvement is a word that's very close to my heart. Comes from the Japanese total quality management concept.
Yeah.
In the IT industry, they talk about agility, they talk about quick change, shift, etc. In that kind of a culture, how do people create a metric for themselves to see a continuous improvement happening or not happening within them?
Right. Well, there are two ways. One is, are you achieving your goals
Mm,
incrementally in quicker, faster cycles? The
mm,
second one is, I think it's about self awareness,
mm,
having those goals in the first place. I think there's a vast majority who just slide through life without having some goals for improving themselves. They
mm,
might look at, did I code faster? Did I get a certification, etc. Or even in terms of agility, they might want to get master the concept of how do you do short sprints and how do you achieve continuous improvement. But I
mm.
think it's a different ballgame when you're looking inward and trying to fix a goal
Very true.
for yourself. Anger management, emotional intelligence, small goals which
Yeah.
which are tougher to identify in the first place and then far tougher to measure. Well, some people do have friends and sounding boards who they can use, but I think it's tougher said done than said.
So, which was Usha's tough goal to set and to identify, and you worked on it, and today you seem to have mastered it compared to what you were doing it 8 years, 10 years back? Anything that you can share?
I think one external facing one is, of course, the area of coaching, where I attempted coaching certifications. And
Mm-hmm.
initially, it was tough to maintain the rigor of maintaining your diary or to your coaching log and
Yeah.
going through the rigor of it. Yeah. So that was tough, but eventually happened with the help of mentors and a support group of other coaches.
So what you're saying is young leaders should figure out their method to move closer to the space of mastery for one or two things that they are good at and make the better themselves, right? Yeah. Or I think what you said very nicely, or they just keep sliding through life, figuring out ये भी कर रहे हैं, वो भी कर रहे हैं, but really do not know what we are really very good at, right?
So
Absolutely. Good one. Good one. So uh, I'm interested on the next one. Uh, from an individual perspective, let's take a conversation to an organization space. And Daniel in the book beautifully talks about a couple of tips to improve your company, which is your organization, your function, department, whatever you want to call it. He talks about 9 tips. So let's leave all the nine. I'm going to ask you two that was your favorite. And why did you pick these two from the nine? Because when I did my picking, I had to go round robin. And everything seemed to be important. Pehla bhi
yes,
important hai, सातवां important and nine be important hai. Which are the two and why did you pick these two over the others?
I think one is because I saw it being translated into practice. The one
Okay.
was about having a dedicated time for doing creative work. So
Mm-hmm.
in a large organization context, I saw it being implemented, but
Mm-hmm.
it had mixed results. First was to get the buy-in to have these 2 hours meeting free on a particular Thursday.
Yeah.
Initially, it worked
Mm-hmm.
because everyone was happy. Okay, I can refuse meetings for this time because I'm supposed to be doing some creative work. What was trickier was quantifying the benefits that came from it.
Yeah.
So if you were working on a research project, it was good to say, okay, proof of concept done, something quantifiable came out of it. But for other people, they couldn't actually quantify to the organization what you were doing in those 2 hours that led to some particular result. And
Mm-hmm.
over time, it got diluted. But at least in the initial phase, when keeping those 2 hours for good in forward-looking work, that
Mm-hmm.
did produce results, and it was a good experiment. And I would love to try it out again.
Okay.
Yeah. The second one was slightly fuzzier. The TEDx Day example is mentioned, where you allow people who are working on a particular theme to just concentrate on coming up with a solution, leaving it's a dedicated half day to come up with a solution. Well, ours didn't come up exactly in one day, but there was a huge project around reimagining the performance management process, which had worked beautifully for 15 years, but needed a rejig. And that project took a series of workshops where people came in, brainstormed on what the new system would look like.
Okay.
In those days, it was fashionable to do away with the bell curve, but it was a little tougher to find out what takes its place. And that solution, which had multiple steps, including what happens to benefits, doing away with something around performance bonus, no longer linked to individuals, but to group performances. There were a series of such changes that took a good 2 years to implement across a huge organization. But the root of that was the brainstorming workshops that used to happen when
Right.
people who are empowered to come up with answers leave out every other distraction and work on a particular problem and come up with a solution.
So tell me, I'm going to ask you a very general question, tempted basis your answer that you're giving me. The book is called Drive. Have you had multiple drives over the 2 decades of work that, initial 5 years, Ajit, this was a drive, then the drive shifted, then the drive shifted. Today it has settled on one particular drive. Is that real like that?
I have
In
never
terms,
thought
which
of
means
it
has
in,
drive been absolute for you or has it been a variable over the years?
I think it has been a variable, definitely.
Mhm.
But it could be the topics you're focusing on that change a bit. Yeah. Initially is to find your footing and figure out which of these subtopics in HR, for instance, you're interested in. But the motivator is, I think, forever to be the better version of yourself. I think the basic drive doesn't change, but some expressions, there could be some variants that change across. example, the drive of being, purposeful, that has been constant. So the drive for autonomy, while it wasn't labeled as autonomy, I'm sure that was there as a part of me, which wanted to have some degree of control in the way, or flexibility in the way we work, in the choices we make. I think the inherent drive, the factors are the constant. Some expressions of it might change across the
Any,
years.
any mistake from which you would want to tell the young people who are searching their drive? What should they do so that they don't delay in time?
It's very easy to get confused with external benefits.
Lovely, yeah.
CTC of a particular job, designation of a particular job, extremely glamorous, very attractive, but it could distract you from your own purpose, which could be very different from what others are looking for. Because those I've noticed, I've taken one fancy assignment and not been happy because there was a value clash or something like that. So while picking up assignments, do enough research and not get swayed by external factors. Would be perhaps.
I remember in my career also it happened. I picked up something because of the designation fancy and the larger canvas that was offered to me, and I figured out in 8 months this is completely a wrong choice. And I had to say thank you. It was nice working with the people, but I'm on a different road. So true. Very true. I think that realization happens when you're in your mid 30s, maybe, or isn't it? It doesn't happen before that. I don't know. I mean, at least I can speak with my experience.
Yeah, I'm not sure when, but I'm certain now that if I look back, I know where the choices were wrong. And making a few difficult choices is good because it finally leads you to a place where you're happy.
Yeah. All of us seem to be wiser in hindsight, but not then.
Absolutely. Yes.
Lovely. Lovely. So I'm going to ask you the last one. From all your years of experience, Usha, being in the HR, I think I won't take HR, being in the corporate world as a professional worker, and the book that you are talking about today, any two specific bullseye advice to the young that they should take away from this?
I think one is keep your eyes open for such concepts, in books. Sometimes people say they're too theoretical. Books are too theoretical. I get more practical experience interacting. I think you need a combination because this book is certainly an eye opener. It was when I first read it, and it certainly gave ideas that you could implement in the workplace.
Very true. Very true.
So that would be one.
Yeah.
Two is, I'm not sure, but each one is at their own pace. They have to figure out answers for themselves. And you can't compare your journey with someone else's. So be happy in the space you are and figure out the steps by being more and more self-aware, spending some time in reflection, in reading. So not just reading for the sake of reading, but in applying some of it to your own.
Reflecting on it.
Yeah.
Very true. I think you're very right because when people say books are theoretical, even I get little. Why would somebody say that? Because a book is written by an author basis certain practical application by similar human beings in the past. There is precedent of proof to it. It has just gotten into the pages because of the magical ability of the author to put it in words for people like us. So, what is theoretical about it? It is still practical. You can pick it up and go back and try it. Work for a John or a Matthew in some part of the world. Work for Noshar or Rajiv in this part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very true. Very, very true. So, what's the book that you're currently reading?
Oh, I have two books which are half read. There's one Simon Sinek, which is saying leaders eat last.
Eat last.
And there is another one which honestly I don't know. It's half read and it's somewhere in this pile of books.
Okay. Leaders Eat Last is a very, very nice book. Very, very good book. Super. Very, very lovely, lovely conversation, Usha. Thank you so much for taking time and having this chat. I completely enjoyed it. I hope you had a good time.
Thank you, Rajiv, for having this interesting format. It's new, but it's definitely interesting.
Absolutely. Very interesting. I look forward to meeting you sometime in the future.
Sure.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you.